if we move on to the next slide. Okay. Next slide, please. So the course structure kind of looks like this. You'll basically have these type of units: kinematics, dynamics, waves and sound, electricity and magnetism, and modern physics. Depending on your teacher, you might have them in different orders, but kinematics and dynamics are definitely the first two you're going to have. And then modern physics might be touched on and might not. And then your assignment breakdown kind of looks like this, depending on which curriculum you were in. For Ontario and for the year I was in, I had the assignments were like 20%, quizzes were 30, lab work 25, final exam was 25. So how to learn and improve? Active participation is something I emphasize a lot. You have to actually be paying attention in class. So when the teacher is actually explaining the different concepts, try to engage. If you have any questions, raise your hand and ask. There's no such thing as a silly question. And try to actually answer questions and practice. If you guys are doing a practice problem in class, participate, which is the next point I have: practice problems. Every day when you're assigned different practice problems, or even the practice problems that are available in the textbook under the unit section and topic you're learning, practice them, practice them, practice them. Like Zain was saying, the muscle memory, the understanding of the actual topic that you're learning will just get engraved into your mind, engraved into you. And then concept mapping, creating visual aids and different things like that. I highly emphasize drawing and actually trying to understand physics, because physics is a very theoretical and very how would I put this, creative, I guess. You kind of really need to understand the different um, main points, main topics that are coming along, because you can't really solve a physics question. A lot of times the teachers will give you a set of formulas or a set of principles that you'll need to follow. And then based on the question, you'll have to apply these principles and these formulas and manipulate them in a way to help you solve those answers. So drawing and actually understanding the actual concept will allow you to actually apply these formulas, manipulating them into different ways to actually help you reach the end point. So, like I said, resources, use your textbook. The textbook is what the teachers actually use to teach you, right? It's not something they just give you at random. A lot of their slides, their presentation, their teaching schedules are based on the textbook. So it's definitely something you should be going back to, reading the actual topic and what the authors of the textbook wrote, and practicing. YouTube is an amazing source as well. Organic chemistry tutor, Professor Leonard, who also Khan Academy. There's so many great YouTube channels that will actually help you and assist you in learning. So general tips, regular reviews. This is something which I did not do in grade 11, which I built on and did in grade 12. Regularly review what you learned in class. The forgetting curve is a real thing. You're gonna forget if you do not review. So review every day or every other day. Practice, 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 and actually go over them on the weekend. I know it seems like it takes time, but I promise you it won't take more than half an hour to an hour a day if you're staying on top of your work. And then group study. I always found group studying very enjoyable. You're sitting with a bunch of friends or like-minded individuals where you're kind of sitting there and you're working on questions together, discussing the topic, and you kind of understand. And if you have any questions and you're not so comfortable talking with the teacher, your friends or the group you're studying with will definitely help you out. And it's definitely just something. It's a big relief and definitely assists you in learning. And then I'd say for lab skills, labs are amazing. Whatever theory you're learning in class, because of the heavy theory base in physics, you actually see it in the lab while you're doing the skills. So implementing the labs and actually learning from the labs, not just doing it mindlessly, or letting your lab group mates or group doing the work, is actually very beneficial. You need to be hands-on, looking at the lab, trying to analyze what is going on. And this way, your mind's going to make the connection between the theory and what you're applying. And then the understanding just gets perfected over there. So we have chemistry now with Monica.
Okay, so now I'm just going to talk a little bit about how to do well in chemistry. Next slide. Okay, so this really depends on your teacher, but usually the units that are covered in chemistry include atomic structure and bonding, So, like the wave particle duality of electrons, like the Bohr model, electron configuration, hybridization, like all of that. And then thermodynamics, which is like calorimetry, entropy, enthalpy, kinetics, which is like reaction rates and rate laws, dynamic equilibrium. This includes like acid-base equilibrium, titrations, stuff like that. And then finally, organic chemistry and electrochemistry, which are often skipped by some teachers and they're not as emphasized as the other units. Okay, so I structured my tips a little bit differently because I do have different tips for each unit in chemistry. Starting off with atomic structure and bonding. So this unit is very theory heavy. You really have to understand the concepts that are taught in this unit to actually understand like the quantum model and understand why electrons behave as both waves and particles. Sorry. So, yeah, so you have to understand the theory and understand how everything works and where all of the equations come from. And the best way to do this is after your teacher teaches a lesson in this unit, explain the theory back to yourself and try to explain the theory to others. And this is called the Feynman technique, where you try to teach someone else what you just learned. And this is the best way to solidify conceptual knowledge. Because if you can explain it well to someone else, then that means you yourself understand that topic. And so some things you can do is you can try to explain the quantum theory. You can try to explain orbitals and their shapes and why they can be found in certain electron densities. And just yeah, try to explain that and try to draw out any diagrams that might be included with these theories. Sorry. So next for thermodynamics, again, understand the theory behind enthalpy, entropy, and when they're positive and negative. So understand how the enthalpy when something is like exothermic, it's like negative, and then how that relates to entropy, and just understand how like the different terminologies that are used in thermodynamics and how they relate to the theory. And the next thing is to practice a lot of questions. Usually they're pretty straightforward. You're just like adding and multiplying different like values of the heats of like the reaction energies, which should be pretty easy. But do practice a lot of calorimetry questions because those are the questions that trip people up the most, and they're often multi-step problems. So you have to really practice them to understand how to do them. But once you practice, you can develop your own kind of step-by-step way of how you do them. And after that, you kind of just have to memorize the steps and solve for different variables depending on what is given in the question. So next we have kinetics. This one, again, it's a combination of both theory and problem solving. So the main thing that you have to understand for this unit is collision theory and the factors that affect rates. So, for example, if you increase the temperature, how does that affect the rate? If you decrease the concentration, how does that affect the rate? And once again, practice a lot of kinetics questions, such as solving for rate laws. And I don't know if your teacher would do this, but maybe integrated rate laws. Again, these should be pretty straightforward as long as you understand the theory. So next, for dynamic equilibrium, this is probably mathematically the hardest unit in 12 4U chemistry. And so you have to practice a lot of different types of questions because for dynamic equilibrium, you can have three different types of acid-base problems, right? You can have strong acid, weak base, strong base, weak acid, strong base, strong acid, which you'll learn eventually in grade 12. But there's a lot of different types of problems. And so you have to familiarize yourself with each type of problem and develop your own step by step as to how you would solve each type of problem and learning how to recognize those types of problems. And also, you have to understand how titrations work. I remember back when I was learning titrations, it was kind of confusing to me because you have like those titration graphs, and then you have to know how to do titrations in the lab, and you have to know how to calculate all of that. So just understanding again the theory behind equilibrium and understanding titrations in order to do well in your tests and your practice problems. So next for organic chemistry, grade 12 organic chemistry is pretty basic. You usually just learn about functional groups and how to name them and how to draw like different molecules, and you might touch a bit on reactions. But the main thing that you have to know for organic chemistry is just know the different functional groups and do a lot of naming practice because that is really emphasized in grade 12 chemistry. Especially those like really large and complex molecules with a lot of different functional groups. It's good to practice naming those. And finally, for electrochemistry, this one is probably the unit that's spent like the least time on. So honestly, just know how to assign oxidation numbers to different chemicals, and also practice balancing redox reactions because that's like the main thing that your teacher would focus on because those are a little tricky to master. So do a lot of those. Okay, so next I'm going to go into a little bit about how to do well in biology. So it's been a while since I've done biology, but some units that your teacher might cover include biochemistry, cellular transport, cellular respiration. So this is like the Krebs cycle and photosynthesis, cell communication and the cell cycle, mitosis and meiosis, Mendelian genetics, and also DNA replication. So that's transcription and translation. Next slide, please. Okay, so how to learn and improve in biology. So I want to preface this by saying, um, a lot of people think that biology is like the easiest science course in grade 12. They think that chemistry and physics are a lot harder. And personally, I disagree with that because biology is a different type of science. It's not really like problem solving and logic based. It's very conceptual, but it is not just purely memorization because the concepts that you have to master and grasp in biology are often new to you, and they are a little bit tricky sometimes. So really understanding the concepts, understanding how things work, and really being able to explain everything back to yourself and to teach others to make sure that you know the concepts. That's like what's really important in biology because during tests, if your teacher actually can make good test questions, they will not just test you only on memorization. They're not just going to test you on every step of photosynthesis. They're going to make you actually think about the question and apply the concepts that you learned in class to the questions. And so it's really important to not just purely memorize the information, but to actually understand it and know how to apply it to real life scenarios. So, just some general tips. First is to read ahead. So, if your teacher uses a textbook, make sure that you read ahead 1 to 2 chapters so that you can actually understand what's going on in class because as I said before, a lot of the concepts in biology are completely new to you. You've probably never seen them before, unlike other um, subjects like physics or chemistry. They're very math-based because a lot of those concepts you can kind of just figure out with your logic and using your mathematical reasoning. But with biology, everything is very new, and there's a lot of information that will be covered during class. And so it's really important to read ahead to familiarize yourself with the material beforehand, and so you don't fall behind during class and you actually know what's going on. And so I didn't put this on the slide, but a really good biology resource for those who are interested is a textbook called Campbell Biology. This is like the most comprehensive biology textbook for high school and university students. It covers everything that your teacher would cover in class, but better. So if you guys like want to learn more about biology, you can just search up Campbell Biology online PDF, and you can read a bit about that online. Okay, so, so my next tip is active recall. So a lot of you probably already use this or you've heard of it before, but active recall is basically forcing yourself to recall things rather than just passively reading over your notes and thinking that you remember something when you actually don't. And so the best way to do active recall and spaced repetition is to make flashcards. So personally, I like using Anki. A lot of people use things like Quizlet. They might make like handwritten flashcards, whatever works best for you. But active recall is best for memorizing very specific details from class. Um, it's not really as good for understanding like conceptual stuff. But let's say you're learning about cellular respiration. There's a lot of steps that go into cellular respiration, right? And there's a lot of different molecules that come into play there. And so sometimes if you have to memorize those things for a test, um, it's best to use active recall because in the end, the basis of actually conceptually understanding something is to kind of memorize the components of that thing before you actually understand the concepts behind it. And so memorization is really important, but it's not the most important thing. So active recall can definitely help you with memorization. So the next thing that can definitely help you find more conceptual knowledge is mind maps. And so if your teacher is good, they would usually give you some big ideas to focus on before each class or for each unit. And these are kind of like the big concepts that you need to take away and master from each class. And these aren't really the minuscule details, like which protein is involved in whichever process. It's kind of like the overarching like learning goals for that unit. And so you really want to understand some of those concepts. And the best way to understand that is through making mind maps, where you can connect different concepts together and explain the reasoning as to why those things connect, and to kind of see how the different units within biology actually connect to each other and apply to real life situations. Because usually the test that your teacher would give will test you on these big ideas rather than small, minuscule details. So next to help you with conceptual knowledge is to actually draw out diagrams and make sure that you can explain them. So this is especially important for really tricky concepts such as DNA replication and metabolism, because for those, there's a lot of processes that are involved and a lot of different cycles that you kind of have to memorize. And so drawing out diagrams from memory for like photosynthesis, for example, would definitely help you memorize and help you identify what you don't remember. So if you're missing a step in your cycle, you can go back to your textbook and fill that in, and then just try to draw out that diagram from memory every day to understand how these processes work and to also remember how they work. And also be able to explain these steps using your diagram. So going back to what I said at the start, biology is not just about memorizing facts. And so you actually do have to do some practice problems because this is how you understand how to apply these big ideas and concepts to problem solving and also understand what kind of things your teacher would actually test you on. And so sometimes your teacher might give you practice problems that come with like worksheets. Make sure you do those. Make sure you do anything that's like on your textbook, especially multiple choice problems. I find that those are actually trickier to do than just like long answer problems. And any past tests that you can get your hands on, make sure you know how to do those. And make sure you ask your teacher or your classmates or consult your textbook if there's anything that you don't understand. And that leads into my last point, which is to dig deeper and to clarify anything you're not sure about. There's just so many small details in biology and so many difficult concepts that you have to master that sometimes some details might just go over your head. And so if you're ever trying to like explain a concept to yourself, or if you're ever drawing a diagram or trying to do practice problems and something doesn't make sense to you, make sure you understand how that thing works. Because if you don't understand one thing, it's just going to pile up and you're not going to understand the entire unit. And so making sure that you actually clarify things that you're not sure about and to ask questions. And that concludes my part on biology and chemistry. And also, before I pass it off to Adam again, we are going to be posting a drive with my biology and chemistry notes and also some additional resources that will be added over time on our link trees. So if you guys want free biology and chemistry notes and also some resources for calculus, make sure you check out our link tree in the bio of our Instagram after this event if you want those resources. Yeah.
Okay, everyone. English, the course which the majority of the people actually despise. But I was one of those people, and I grew to love it during grade 12. And I'll let you guys know why. So, course structure. So, we have these units covered. We'll do literally an literary analysis, but it will be for not for all of these. It'll be for a handful or two or three. For my year, I did poetry and philosophy, nonfiction, and media studies. But your teacher might do different ones. They might do the same ones that I did, or different ones. Doesn't really, or a mix. Doesn't really matter. And then assessment breakdown really depends on the teacher themselves. So your assignments, like essays, might be like 30%. Tests and quizzes, like short case study based, like or quick readings and answer quick questions might be 25%. Class participation is really important in English. And oral presentations, or you have oral discussions, and then the final exam, which is usually an essay or an oral discussion, depending on your teacher. So, how to learn and improve, learning strategies, regular reading. A lot of people think they can just write and then they'll be good at writing, and then their teacher should give them a 90 straight away. I hate to break it to you, but a lot of times, and especially when I read my peers' essays or a lot of different people's essays, it was close to mediocre. Why? Because we're in an age of technology where everyone is consuming media orally and visually, and it is very rare to see anyone consuming media verbally or literary reading. You actually need to read to be good at English. English is an art. You do not expect someone to be an artist or a good painter just by the first try, by just writing, or by just drawing. And if he just draws once every month or what, so on, you need to practice, read, write, so on and so forth. So that takes me to the next point: essay writing practice. When you're writing an essay draft, make multiple versions for an essay. When I would come to write an essay, for an example, I'd write my first draft, then my second draft, then my third, and then I'd take the best parts of all three and combine them into one, which takes me to mapping, which is combining. When you take all these different ideas and themes and sentences, and you kind of create this large map, and then you combine them into your final piece of essay, which is going to be your best work. So for resources to kind of develop this, use textbooks, educational websites, literary analysis. But honestly, the best thing you can possibly use is the book in your library, or the book that's been collecting dust on your shelf that you haven't read at all. So for general tips, I'd say stay organized, keep track of everything, have a list, because a lot of times when you're writing essays or when you have readings to do, it's time consuming. And if you're trying to balance it with different courses, sometimes people tend to neglect English and leave it for the end. But realistically, you might have a couple pages due in a day, or this essay due in like 3 days, and you might forget about it. And then at the end, you have to rush something, and you might craft something that isn't to your full potential. Review and read regularly, already stated before. Balance and work rest. So what I like to like break study sessions into manageable chunks. When you're studying, for example, different courses, if you're trying to take a rest, maybe that book you need to read for this essay you need to write, how about you sit down, relax, and kind of mindlessly read, try to pick words here and there as you rest. This way you're tackling or you're hitting two birds with one stone. And then seek help. Don't be afraid to ask your peers. I used to always ask my friends when I'm writing a speech or I'm writing an essay. I'd go to my friends, I'd go to my teachers, even teachers of different courses. If you have a good relationship with them, they'll be more than happy to actually read your essay and actually give some insights. or read your speech and actually give some insights. And then practice critical thinking and writing. So when you read something, even if it's visual, if you're watching a reel, or if you're watching a YouTube video or something, and it has some knowledge to it, it has some important information, it's not some mindless entertainment. Try to analyze, try to get the deeper meaning. And this takes me to the other step of critical thinking is a lot of people when I read their essays when or peer reading, or that's an issue I had earlier with my essay writing or my English career. A lot of people had an issue with organizing their thoughts. A lot of time nowadays, no one really um, has no one really journals, no one really writes. Everything is digital, where even if you look at the text messages between you and your friend, they're very chaotic, they're very random. The media that you consume is very quick, it's very adapt. So when you come down to actually write an essay, you're 9 times out of 10, you're not going to produce the best thing. And it will be the most disorganized, unneat, really mediocre in its analysis. So when it comes to English, you really need to calm yourself down and then go and actually complete the essay reading and then analyze the different texts. And then when you're going to write the essay, sit down and organize. So first I'm going to write this, then I'm going to write this, multiple drafts. English is a art. It is not something you can just do on the flow, which a lot of people mistake. And then I'll just give some general tips. Read the things that you enjoy, and then I'd say a very healthy tip to do is journal. Journal about your day, journal about your thoughts, journal about your feelings, things about you want to do in the future. Because a lot of people have this clutter in their mind because of all this media we're consuming and this digital world we live in, and you're always consuming media, you're always listening to music, you're always listening to different things, and your mind never really has a break to actually think, organize, and relax. So journaling really, really, really helps, and it really improves your English mark. I saw this big jump, especially from grade 11 to grade 12, because I picked up journaling in the summer between grade 11 and grade 12, stuck with it in grade 12, and it has just worked wonders for me. And yeah, read what you enjoy. I was lucky. I really enjoyed philosophy, history, and politics. And then when I reached grade 12, I was lucky enough to have a teacher who actually taught us about our action units were mainly about philosophy. We learned about Tolstoy. Uh, we learned about Aristotle. We learned about Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman ruler. So his topics I already had read before and already had a lot of knowledge about, and it was something I just excelled in. So definitely explore, read, journal, organize, and relax. Thank you.
Yeah, everyone. So that essentially concludes our webinar for today. As Monica mentioned previously, we have free biology and chemistry notes on our link tree. This includes stuff like worksheets, just general notes, and some flashcards that we have all put together. You should be able to access it on our link tree soon, if not already. And yeah, definitely look out for more resources that are to come. So now would be the time for our Q&A. So if you guys have any questions or anything you wanted us to address, we would be more than happy to help you now. In terms of econ, so that is not a course that I personally took, or Monica and Adam. I'm not sure if you guys took that either. However, from what I learned or heard from friends, econ is can get tricky at times. There can be a lot of workload, but in general, if you do stay on top of things and complete your work on time and stay engaged with the content, it shouldn't be too tough of a course. It should be pretty easy and definitely easy to handle with your other core courses. For co-op and French, I know co-op is definitely a really amazing experience to, go out on the field and explore how the world functions and runs in real time, especially when you're so isolated at school at times. For co-op, I guess I would recommend finding an environment that perfectly suits you. A lot of times you might think that this place with this name might be such a good experience and I'm able to learn a lot. However, when you get there, the environment might not be inviting or you may not feel totally comfortable there. So definitely check out the environment first and make sure that you're working in a place where, or you're going to be in a place where you feel like you'll be actually able to learn and develop yourself and progress yourselves. In terms of French, I had not taken French. I don't think Monica or Adam have taken French either. But from what I've heard from a friend of mine, they said it was pretty simple, pretty easy. Stay on top of your work, get all your tasks completed on time, don't slack off, and kind of leave it for the end. But definitely make sure, like, don't slack off and leave it for the end. But it's definitely very manageable and doable.
I'd like to add on to the co-op thing, and I think I really believe that co-op, it's up to you. It's really easy for you to get job experience with co-op. Um, if you're a student. But honestly, me myself, I didn't take co-op, and I had 1 to 2 internships that were actually remote, that were actually across the world, and that gave me a lot of beneficial experience. So if you're trying to get that work experience, you don't need co-op necessarily. You can actually take other courses that you might be interested in. But if you're trying to get an easy way through and have the school and have an organization actually assist you in finding a actual experience, then co-op would be beneficial. But definitely look into getting co-ops and internships on your own.
There was a question in the chat that asked what YouTubers can help with advanced functions. Also, um, if there was an if there was a chance at the end of the semester where I wanted to ask my teacher for a boost marker or a mark boost, how would I go about it? From my personal experience, no teachers ever provided me with a mark boost, and it's definitely very difficult for them to give you a mark boost because it does go against their ethical guidelines and what they can do and not do as teachers. I think someone already asked the YouTuber example, but yeah, for mark boost, I would recommend not going for mark boost or asking for them. From the teacher's side, it may seem like you are actively trying to, use their niceness and kindness to get more marks and benefit you, which is not a good idea and may not even reflect well on your mark. All I will say is definitely be really nice and kind across the semester. Actively engage with their lessons. Always raise your hand. Always participate in lessons and answer questions. Through that, your teacher might be more generous with your final grade. They may give you an extra 1 or 2% that you didn't necessarily deserve, but because you were actively engaged and the teacher genuinely liked you, it does help you out. So that's what I would 1000% recommend for that. Another person in the chat asked, do you have any tips or advice for finding balance with studies, post-secondary and extracurricular? Honestly, my advice for that is you gotta go with the flow. There are some times in the year academically where things are really light. You don't have a test for 2 weeks, you're on top of your material, you know what you're doing, and like academically, everything is perfect. So now you need to recognize that as the perfect opportunity to devote time towards your extracurriculars and maybe post-secondary applications. It's about time managing and also knowing how you can manage your time well. For example, do you need to be really spending 5 hours a day doing math homework? Probably not. You can maybe spend an hour or two, and even spend another 2 hours on like chemistry. And then you can spend an hour on extracurriculars. Finding that right balance and as well recognizing that at certain times of the year, academics have to take priority. When it comes to exam season, you're probably not gonna when it comes to exam season, you're not going to be doing a volunteering shift the day before your exam. That doesn't seem very likely, and I would not advise that because you don't lose anything by skipping a day of volunteering, but you might lose a lot in terms of your performance on the exam. So definitely recognize that academics takes priority. And I realize that now coming to post-secondary, it a lot of time in high school gets wasted on things that are not necessarily important. By recognizing how also you're using every single second of your day and taking advantage of every single second of your day, you'll be able to do a lot more.
Can I add to that really quickly?
Yeah.
Definitely explore using Notion Calendar. I personally use Google Calendar, Google Tasks, and Google Sheets, and you kind of can create like this second mind system where you kind of schedule your day, put all your classes, put all your tasks, your homeworks, uh, post secondary needs and wants, scholarship stuff, extracurriculars, so on and so forth. It's a great habit to build from grade 12, which I regret not doing. And I kind of had to teach myself and start this summer going into post secondary.
Yeah, for sure. Notion is basically the number one thing I rely on every day, and Google Calendar. Those are the two things I can't live without. So definitely really recommend those. Another person in the chat asked, what universities do you guys attend by chance? And what was something you realized helped you a lot in the middle of grade 12 and started to do ASAP? So in terms of university, me personally, I attend Queens. I'm in their health sciences program. And something I realized in the middle of grade 12 is that I do not necessarily need to be doing as much as I was. At times, I would spend so much time doing homework and assignments and trying to learn. But there comes a point on a graph where the more amount of effort you put in, the higher your success will be. But there comes a point where it starts plateauing, and then the more effort you put in, the lower your success or your in the end your grade will be. This is because we need to learn how to give ourselves rest and understanding what rest helps us most. Most. A lot of people benefit from doing exercise as their rest. A lot of people benefit from napping as their rest. A lot of people benefit from playing video games as their rest. And it truly doesn't matter what rest it is, but you need to give yourself that rest. For personally for advanced functions, I used to do the homework like 3 or 4 times over every time before a test. And I realized that that technically didn't really help me. There was no point in doing that. I'm just wasting time down the drain. Towards the end of the semester, I used to just do the homework 1 time over before a test, and I would achieve the same mark as I did before. So now I just saved myself about 4 or 5 hours that I can rest in, I could do EC stuff in, I can hang out with friends with. Like there's so much, like I mentioned before, coming to post secondary now, I realized that there's so much time in the day and so much that you can do with that time. It takes a lot of knowledge and power, though, to utilize every second of the day well. And that's something, it's a skill, it's not something you're born with, and something that everyone here can definitely improve on, including myself. Yeah, for sure. So another question in the chat, how did you guys personally study for advanced functions? I don't know how to study and I want to use the best methods. I mentioned this right now, but I studied by doing practice problems. So starting 3 days before the test, I would sit down, I would redo all the practice problems that my teacher assigned. The next day, I would do the same thing. At times, it wasn't very productive or good because I'd already memorized the answers for some of the questions, which goes back to my point about that fact I didn't need to be doing that much and putting in that much effort and just continuously doing that. I would definitely try to take advantage of any practice tests that the teacher posted, or if you can or cannot get your hands on potentially tests from previous years, I would recommend doing those too. It gives you an expectation of what you can see or what you might see on a test. You're welcome. We are more than happy to answer any questions, guys. So for sure, if you have anything you wanted to ask, do put it in the chat and we'll be very happy to answer. So another question in the chat, if you fall behind due to extenuating circumstances, how do you catch up efficiently? That's
I think
definitely
I should
in
answer that.
yeah, for sure, go for it.
Okay, so me personally, in the end of grade 11, I had a injury in my lower back, and I kind of neglected it, and I didn't even know it was an injury. Obviously, Canadian healthcare system. A couple months until you actually find out what's wrong with you. So I went the first semester, went really smooth, didn't wasn't much, and then towards it was January, February, things started getting really bad in my back, numbness in my right leg, lack of mobility, couldn't sit down for long, and I actually missed lots of days and lots of weeks of classes just because I was getting MRI checks, going to the doctor, days where I couldn't feel like getting off my bed, and I was really behind towards second semester midterm, which is the most crucial part for universities and for the end of the year. It did hinder me. I wish I had done this before and I kind of learned, but I'll tell you what I've learned. To actually catch up with it, you should definitely talk to your friends right away or people you know you have in your class, um, and they actually like help you and give you notes. I didn't do that. I didn't ask for notes. I didn't ask for help. I just thought, okay, I'll just go, I'll gun it, I'll do it on my own, and I'll just teach myself. You can't do that. That's not going to work. And it's very difficult unless you're some genius. Talk to the teacher. I didn't talk to any teachers or even the guidance counselors. I didn't tell them about my health issues uh, because I felt like I didn't need to or I was fine. I was just trying to man up, if you want to say. Like, So definitely need to talk to them, express and let them know what's going on in your life. Because other than that, they're just gonna think that you're skipping or you're not in class. I did end up telling them towards the end of the year, where they kind of helped me with my grades a bit. Um, but definitely talk to them about your situation. And then last but not least is actually study, actually practice as much as you can. Due to my health and injury issue, I wasn't really as efficient as I should have. I definitely had times where I kind of slacked off or used my extenuating like situation or circumstance as an excuse. But don't do that. Don't try to like buy into the guilt. Just try as hard as you can, and I hope things work out for you.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that insight. So there's a question in the chat. What is the grade some of you had to maintain during second sem with calculus? If it's a prereq, I think Monica answered that. But in general, the conditional averages aren't very high. Some are in 70s, some are in the 80s. Definitely do not like stop going to school and not doing tests. That's not the smart thing to do. But you should be fine with keeping a average above the 70s or 80s. Again, we're more than happy to answer more questions. We have a lot of experiences and knowledge from our time in high school, and we're definitely want to pass it on to you guys. Additionally, if you do not have any questions or anything you wanted to mention to us, you definitely are free to leave. You don't have to stay for the full time being. But again, we're going to stay here for about another 10 minutes and answer the questions you guys have.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
So the meeting is recorded, right? If you came late and you kind of forgot about the meeting, are you able to get a hold of the recording?
Yes, absolutely. So this meeting or this webinar will be posted on our YouTube channel. Hopefully within the next 24 hours, it is recorded. So yeah, definitely just look out for that.
All right, thank you so much.
No worries. If you guys have any questions, feel free to also unmute and say them, or you can also just put it in the chat as we have been doing previously.
Don't be shy. We won't be judging you. There is no such thing as a silly question.
Okay, yeah, so we're just gonna stay in the call for like 10 more minutes. If anyone else has any questions, like if you think of anything, feel free to ask. If not, you guys are free to leave. And yeah, we thank you guys so much for coming today, and we all hope you learned something new from this session, and we hope you do really well in your courses this year. And if you have any other questions that you think of, feel free to DM or Instagram or email us. Okay, so would you recommend asking for feedback from teachers more frequently on assignments? I often just do everything on my own without asking for feedback before submitting. Okay, this is a good question. I would say it honestly depends on the vibes of your teacher. Um, because some teachers if they're nice and generous, they would want to give you feedback, while other teachers might think that you're like annoying if you ask them for feedback. And those are like the really bad teachers. So it really depends on which teacher you have. And it also depends on the subject. So I would say if you're in English or any like humanities writing intensive course, I would say definitely ask for feedback before you submit anything, especially on things like your thesis or like your intro paragraph. That's like usually the most important part of things like your essays. So you can definitely reach out to your teacher and ask them for some feedback on that. I would say the science courses, there's usually not that much feedback, or I mean, not that many assignments. So if you have any questions, just like ask your teachers, I guess. But I would say asking for feedback isn't as important as like English and humanities courses. I hope that answers your question. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, for sure. If you have any further questions and something you want to ask us, definitely reach out to our Instagram, which is where you like to sign up for this event. You can send us a direct message, and someone from the STEM Buddies team will get back to you and try to answer it in the best way we can.
Oh yeah, so we're just gonna wait for like 5 more minutes for any other questions if anyone has anything. And you can feel free to just unmute if you have any questions. You don't have to type it out in the chat. Do you have any tips or recommendations for AI use that promote the best learning and efficiency without losing the practice or experience of doing work? Oh, this is a really good question. Honestly, I don't really use AI when I'm like doing my work. Um, I don't know. Zane or Adam, you guys can like take this question.
Yeah, for sure. I too don't really use AI much for like studying or work purposes. However, something that I recently learned and something cool that you can do is if you have all your notes on a Google document or something of the sort, something you can copy from, I would recommend copying the content from the notes or the notes and copy and pasting it into something like ChatGPT. By pasting it to ChatGPT, you can ask it to give you practice questions. And from there, you can kind of test your knowledge and see if you're knowing the material the way you should or not. So that's a cool application that I learned about recently. So basically telling ChatGPT to give you practice questions. Other than that, I would say that I did use AI sometimes for like social sciences or English courses as a means of giving ideas and having it give me feedback about where areas I can improve my paragraph the most. Something that's really good is peer review, obviously having a friend review your paragraph or article, but sometimes that's not always possible. Your friend might be busy. So I would put it to ChatGPT and ask it to review it for me and tell me what it thought, and then from there I can kind of improve it and yeah, make it better.
Oh, wait, I have a recommendation. So, um, when I'm like writing stuff, if something sounds off or if I want it to be rephrased to sound more fluent, I use this website called Quillbot. I can put the link in the chat, but it basically just rephrases your stuff to sound more fluent and it just sounds better.
I mean, I'd say for AI, definitely try to like stay away from it as much as you can. Especially for I know Monica's tip is very useful, but for English, in terms of English, a lot of like teachers would actually count that as like cheating or plagiarism or like using AI when you're not supposed to do that. If it's for unprofessional cases or you're not trying to submit it or have it AI checked or whatever, then definitely use it. I also use ChatGPT or AI for practice problems. A lot of the practice problems sometimes they'll give you the final answer, but they won't show you the process on how to actually solve it. And if you're kind of in a rut or you're kind of stuck and you don't know really where you went wrong, you can definitely just put in the question and then put in the final answer and then compare the process that you had with the process of ChatGPT, for example, in physics or mathematics, and it's useful there. But AI is like a very expanding field right now. I definitely say be very wary, especially now in secondary school and then especially in post secondary. You don't want to build a bad habit of relying on AI too much, and then you kind of lost all your academic skills or credibility. So definitely just be careful on that.
But yeah, that essentially concludes today's webinar. We were so happy to have